Earlier in the week, we traveled to the Foundry Restaurant in Manchester, New Hampshire, and sat down with a small group of Trump voters, assembled with the help of YouGov on the one-year anniversary of the president's election. We wanted to see if he was living up to their expectations. Some responses were as we anticipated, but some surprised us. So it's been 1 year since Donald Trump was elected president. By a show of hands, who here thinks he's doing a good job?
A good job or a great job?
Okay, we know which way you're going to do.
Make the presidency great again.
Let's try it again. Let's do it this
Sorry.
way. No, that's fine. That's good. We'll get there. It's been 1 year since Donald Trump was elected president. Who here, by show of hands, thinks the country is doing better now than it was a year ago? All six of you. All
Yes.
right. Tom, why do you think the country's doing better now?
I think the economy's remained strong. I think that's very important. Job growth has been good. We haven't had too many major conflicts internationally yet. There's a lot of things brewing, but overall, I think we've had a stable year, which is good.
And is that because of things Donald Trump has done, or?
I think he's helped. He's definitely helped. He hasn't hurt the cause too much internationally. I think his tactics are definitely unique, and we'll see how they work in the long haul. But overall, so far, it looks okay.
Diane, why is this year better with Donald Trump as president?
I agree with most of that, and also I think he's doing a lot of things behind the scenes that most people don't know about, and a lot of them was raising the restrictions to make business more robust, and I think that he is doing something about immigration, but it seems to be very slow.
You say it seems to be very slow.
Slow.
Would you like to see him go faster on immigration?
Yes,
How and do more, or just do it faster?
do faster and more.
And what does that mean? Does that mean building the wall, or?
We've all kind of discussed this, and the consensus was we'd like to have all of the illegal aliens go home.
Peter, what makes you think the country's better off after a year of Donald Trump as president?
Well, the economy is certainly a big thing. It was nice to see the economy jump a little bit from the end of Obama's presidency. It seems like a lot of that is just coming from promises that Trump is making. Like he's saying, I'm going to make things better for business. I'm going to lower corporate tax rates. So that builds enthusiasm. So companies seem like they're more willing to invest in the future. If Donald Trump fails to deliver on that, you're going to see things go back to being tepid, back to being really slow. So he better deliver, or else you're going to see a lot of trouble. But other than that, I'm really glad that Neil Gorsuch, can never pronounce his name.
Neil Gorsuch on
the Supreme Court nominee. I'm really glad about that. Get some stable constitutional judges on the bench. So, yeah.
Dina, why do you think the country's better off this year after a year?
I agree with everything that Peter just said. I do. I think that we're doing better financially. The stock market's going up, but I also think that it's because a lot of things that haven't been put into place yet, like the tax reform. But he has already gone ahead and deregulated a lot of things, which makes it easier to do business in America. And that's really the most important issue to me is the economy. I think that with the unemployment down and the stock market up and people just doing better, that's all you need to get it started.
And do you think people are doing better, or just numbers are? When the stock market goes up, does that mean the same thing for you as people are doing better?
No.
Who's doing better when the stock market goes up?
Well, everybody ends up doing better when the stock market goes up because it pumps more money into the economy when it comes right down to it. Some people are making out more than others, but a strong economy is a strong economy for everybody. It does trickle down. I know a lot of people don't like that trickle down, but it has to come from somewhere.
Has it trickled? Have you felt the benefits of the trickle down either this past year or in general?
No, I haven't.
Dennis,
But I
go ahead.
I have a lot of hope with the bringing the business back to America, with making it easier to do business here, that things will get better. And with tax reform, businesses having more money to pay higher wages, offer better health care, hire more employees. So I have confidence that I will fail it eventually.
Dennis, tell me what you think the president, how he's contributed to this better year.
As with the rest, I think the economy is much better. I've seen a significant increase in my 401k over the past year, I should say. The stock market is going up. People are trusting the market now. There more investment. You see more investment occurring because they trust the president, at least to the point of business-wise. And like I agree with Dina that the reduction of all these regulations that have occurred over Obama's presidency, some of them are totally ridiculous. I mean, I'm in healthcare, and some of the regulations that we have to deal with, it's making healthcare more expensive. I mean, some of them are really foolish, and I see President Trump really trying his hardest, and he's getting a lot of flack from the old-time establishment people that have been in there way too long. You really need somebody that's open-minded and willing to work with other people.
Let me ask you about Congress. So it's been 1 year since there was a new Congress in Washington. Who here thinks that Congress is responsible for making things better in the last year? By show of hands.
0 for 6.
Is there a way to show your hands going down? Is there? Who has a particularly? So none of you think Congress is contributing to America in a big. You do or don't?
I don't. I think that they have become so entrenched with each other, and everybody's helping everybody else. They can't get anything done. And it's not Democrats or Republicans, it's every one of them. And they've been there too long. It's, they've made a career out of it, and we don't need lawmakers that are making a career out of Washington.
Peter, why Donald Trump is a negotiator? Why can't he get Congress to come in line with what he wants?
Well, I think that the way things work in Washington is a lot different than in the business world. I heard Rex Tillerson make comments that he was kind of stunned when coming into Washington, and he saw it as like a lot of gossip, and particularly about the media, but I think that holds true for Congress as well. I expect that Trump was also surprised when he's trying to get people to, I bet John McCain threw him for a loop, right? I bet he didn't expect that kind of thing. Like if you're in business, you don't do that to an executive, right? Or you're gone.
Right. But a president isn't an executive. He's at a different branch of government, right?
Exactly. That's the point.
Executive.
So Trump's coming from the business world.
Yeah.
Where everyone under him is working explicitly for him.
Right.
John McCain's working for his constituents, right? He answers
And
to
himself.
them. So I would venture a guess that this is something that Trump has had to adjust to. And it seems like it's been a pretty difficult adjustment.
Terry, what do you feel about people who are in Congress? Should they work for their constituents or work for Donald Trump? If they're Republicans.
They ought to follow their party platform, and from whatever stems from that. I was telling somebody earlier, we have a majority, or the GOP has a majority in Congress, Senate, and the presidency, and they're not working together, and it's shameful. It destroys the party, in my view, and it just creates more independence. So, I wanted to say about Trump's presidency, I think he's made the country more visible, has a more visible presence internationally. I think we're more respected in a way. He stands up for things and he gives reasons for it. I also think he's brought out conflict in the country, like a festering wound that needs to be healed. Racism and all the other stuff that we're all fighting about. And I think he's a kind person and brings out the good in people.
Why do you think he's bringing out the conflict, though? Or where
Why
do you
he's
think?
what?
Where does that? You say President Trump is bringing out the conflict. Where's that coming from?
It's coming from people who hate Trump and people who like Trump. And the hangers-on, the periphery of those two sides.
Tom, when the president talks about draining the swamp, who is the swamp?
I think so. The swamp are the entrenched interests in Washington that have been there for so long and have too much sway over what the government does, how it does it, how much it costs. And for the rest of us on the outside looking into the Beltway, we look at it as just a giant machine that takes all of our hard-earned tax dollars and does things very inefficiently. So to me, one of the biggest legacies that Donald Trump could have is if he minimizes the impact of all the insiders and really levels the playing field quite a bit going forward.
So when you say insiders, do you mean lobbyists or do you mean politicians?
I mean lobbyists, I mean politicians, I mean the very large corporations that are gaining in strength. We're seeing a lot of consolidation in business, and that's not good for the economy. It's very difficult to start a new business and grow it successfully with all the regulations. And some of the biggest proponents of tough regulations are the companies that are already in business and have the money and the expertise to benefit by those regulations by holding others out. So it's a competition issue.
And you think President Trump will get the lobbyists out,
I don't think he'll get them out, but I'm thinking if he holds it steady and maybe minimizes it a little bit, that will be a victory.
Dina, who do you think we're having a big conversation about tax cuts. Who do you think has a bigger seat at the table, the people or the corporations and the special interests in the conversation over how that tax cut's going to get put together?
Well, that's a really difficult to kind of, I'm not doing well. I need to stop. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. Yeah.
You're going to edit this out?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Well, first though, I wanted to talk about, no. Ask me the question again.
Okay, sure. Yeah. Sure. Dina, there's a tax cut bill about to go through Congress.
Yes.
Who's going to have more say in shaping that? The corporations, the special interests, or the interests of the people? Which will have more sway?
Well, the reason why that's difficult to determine is because of the lobbyists that are in Washington. Right now, they're lobbying like crazy to have more say over the tax reform bill. But I have hope that they're not going to have as much of an influence. I feel that with no cuts being, the top tier is still going to be taxed 39.6%, and everybody else's taxes are going to go down, small business, corporations, and the middle class. That's a pretty big seat at the table. But you never know because they are there in Washington lobbying. But just so you know, Trump did sign an executive order to limit when people are done serving how long they can be lobbyists. So he's done that already. So he is trying. I feel like he's trying.
Yeah, and he has people who were former lobbyists working for him. Does that bother you at all in terms of this, whether special interests have?
Yes, it always bothers me when you do it, but you say you shouldn't do it. But that happens on both sides.
Dennis, in this tax debate, who's looking out for you?
I know it's not my senators. That's a good question. It's who is looking out for the common man? It seems like all our politicians, the congressmen, are looking out for themselves. And that's not what we sent them there for. We sent them there to represent us. And if we're telling them, lower the taxes, well, make it happen. And I understand some programs will be cut, but if you decrease the taxes or make an incentive for people and the companies to be able to invest more money. And then they can, with that money, just increase incomes and increase the production without excess taxes, which will then actually put more money in the coffers by having more people working.
Peter, do you feel that way? If corporations get a lower tax rate, they're going to pass the money they save on to the workers who work for them?
If it suits their interest as the business, right? I mean, I don't have a problem with corporations looking out for their own best interests. what you have to hope is that they have a set of ethics where they see that they have a responsibility for the common good, being as big as they are. So as long as they're doing that, things are going to go great because they have a lot of power, a lot of influence, a lot of money. So as long as their ethics are good, then that's fine. So I don't have a problem on principle with them getting tax breaks or having influence in itself, but I doubt whether the ethical state of the country is such where they're going to make the right decisions. So I'm a little skeptical of whether or not we're in a place as a culture to let that happen. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, basically, yeah, that we need good people in the corporations for the corporations to be good.
Well, let me ask you, Diane. One of the arguments for reducing the taxes on corporations is that they will pay lower taxes and they'll pass that savings on to people in the form of higher wages. Does that seem like something that you think is going to happen?
I think not at first, but I think if they see the good of it and they can still make the money that they make, they will buy into it. And I think Trump is enough of a businessman that he can coerce them into doing it. And he would have to clean out the swamp first. And that's the stopgap. He's got to get rid of the Congress and the Senate, or at least get them on his side, because they're inflexible now. And they don't want to give up any of the money that they're taking in and putting in their pocket.
Tom, what's the most unfair criticism about the president?
I'm not really sure how to answer that one, because he has a lot of criticism against him. I'm gonna have to pass on that one. I really can't think of one off the top of my head.
All right, Terry, what do you think? What do you think is the most unfair criticism about President Trump?
I don't know if it's so much criticism as reactionaryism. Anything he says or does, there's a certain part of the population that gets angry and they try to kill him or whatever. You know, they go up to the White House, and I didn't read the whole thing about the guy who went up to the White House recently, but they say out loud, we want to kill Trump. And, they don't really want to do that, I don't think. They're just frustrated because they don't like him or what he stands for, and they don't necessarily know what they want in a president either. It's like I was saying before, the country's divided very deeply. That's the way I see it.
We have a lot of reactionary people.
Dennis, what's the most unfair criticism of the president?
That he's a bully.
Why is it unfair to say that he's a bully?
It's how people perceive him. Some people will say he's a bully. Other people will say he's more aggressive or showing his power. You don't get to the level of where he is without some kind of aggressiveness or what people perceive as being a bully. And he's loud and he's obnoxious, and I still like him.
Yeah. Does anybody have a criticism of the president or something they wish he would not do, or something you'd like to see him do more? Dina?
I just wanted to speak first to when we were talking about the corporate taxes being cut and whether or not that money was going to be used to raise people's wages and give them better health care, and we weren't really sure if that's actually going to happen. I just wanted to throw in that there are some companies that are good, and there are companies that will do that, and that's where the competition comes in. If you have some companies that are hiring more people, paying them better wages, offering them more benefits, and you have a company that's not, who's going to get the workers? So it's sort of like it forces them into it, and I think that people fail to look all the way through sometimes it's a whole cycle, just like tax cuts in general. Everybody gets hung up on whether or not the wealthy are going to pay more or less, when really the whole concept is the more money that goes into the economy, the better everybody does. But it's
so you
hard.
don't mind if the wealthy do better than everyone because everybody's doing well?
How are the wealthy going to do better?
Well, if, say, you had an estate that's over $11 million that you leave to your heirs, it's now not going to be taxed, whereas you and I don't have $11 million.
No, we don't. But they already pay taxes on that money.
So as long as everybody does well,
I don't think they're
in your
getting
mind.
anything
I
in that
agree with
equation.
that. Yes.
And I mean, as far as he's closing the loopholes for the wealthy people, all the tax deductions, they're the people who benefit from that. With those loopholes closed, if they're truly closed, and the tax bracket remaining at 39.6%, they're going to pay more. You know, in theory, we'll have to see.
Does anyone here benefit from or participate in the Affordable Care Act? And what did you think, Peter, about the Affordable Care Act potentially going away?
Well, there are a couple sides to that, right? I benefited directly from having my parents' insurance until I was 26, and I thought that was just. In this economy, people my age are having a really hard time getting off the ground. So, like, I have to work in a restaurant, and I'm going to school, I can't get health insurance through my job, right? So that was good. But then the other side of that is that he's made me buy health care, right? And when I would have liked to have waited until I could pay for it myself or get it through an employer. You know, that would have been good for me, like for my self-respect. So he makes me buy it, or he, right? The law makes me buy it, and then they turn around and say, oh, we'll give you X amount of dollars to help you pay for it. That, I don't like that. It shouldn't, if you're forcing people to do things in government, in the economy, that taxes me, that taxes my energy, as opposed to where government probably should be is they should be telling the insurance companies that you can't discriminate against like pre-existing conditions. That would be probably a valid thing to do, but it doesn't, it's not telling me that I must do this.
Right.
Right, so two sides of that. I'd like to see it go away, even for just that reason, but if we can keep the good parts, get rid of the bad parts, that'd be good.
Tom, do you think that the Affordable Care Act is here to stay, or is there a chance that Obamacare is going to go away somehow?
It's absolutely here to stay. You know, well, the Affordable Care Act, when it was implemented, was designed to stay. They made so many pieces of it difficult to ever repeal that I don't think it's ever going away. I think the best plan is to nip away at the worst aspects of the Affordable Care Act, and then, you know, instead of this broad brush of trying to do everything at once, it just doesn't work. And that's why the Affordable Care Act in itself, in some respects, didn't work when it was initially passed. There are some very good things that have come from it, but there are also some very bad things. You know, we talked about the regulations in healthcare, and the cost of healthcare has continued to rise, and it will continue to rise in large part because of some of the components of the Affordable Care Act.
So you think it should be mended, but not gotten
Absolutely.
rid of completely?
Yeah, it's too big a part of the economy. It impacts too many people in positive ways. There's no way you could get rid of it without major disruption that would not be fair to anyone. And it wouldn't be productive.
Terry, are you worried about the debt, about the national debt?
No, because we can't do anything about it. It just keeps rising. I mean, why not just spend more? I read somewhere that if you taxed everybody 100%, you wouldn't be able to pay the interest on the debt. So where does that leave us? And what I've read in various things on the internet is like a world currency and a devaluation and a balancing of all the currencies depending on the nation's wealth. And I don't know if that's ever going to happen or not. Excuse me, but nobody wants to cut spending, and even if we cut spending, the debt would still be there. It's shameful.
Dennis, are you worried about the national debt?
I'm worried about the national debt for my kids. You know, how much are they going to have to work to pay for it? And she's right. It's like, what as people can we do? I don't know. And we got to stop spending. For some of these projects that are like, you know, the fish. It's like, really? You know, let's cut back some of this baloney, and you know, start cutting. Let's start it at Congress. Make them pay for their health insurance. They get it free, and it's better than what I can get. the poor, like the soldiers, sailors, and Marines that are out there, and they're still fighting and getting injured and coming home disabled. And they have to fight for everything they get. And the congressmen they get what they want. It's just, they're all prima donnas.
So the president's tax plan, the Republican tax plan, they've looked at the numbers, and it's going to cost at least $1.5 trillion. Does that worry about you? Add to the debt $1.5 trillion. Does that worry you?
It does, because where's the value of the money going to go? Where's the dollar going to be against the yen or the pound or the euro? Is that going to tank us? So everything that's coming from Europe is going to cost an arm and a leg? I don't know.
Dina, what do you think about the investigation into Russian meddling in the election?
Before we move on to that, I just wanted to ask you a question, because I can't remember the figure right off the top of my head. But do you know how much debt was added to the deficit when Obama was in office?
Yeah.
Like all of it.
So because, but if there's new debt, so is it a problem?
So with the tax plan, initially the cuts that they make are going to take away from the money that the government brings in. But when you look at the whole long-term concept, that money is supposed to go into the economy. People buy more. Everything is taxed in the economy. Those taxes go to the government. So the theory is that eventually they're going to be bringing in more money to actually pay down the deficit. I think that one of the estimates I saw, over a decade, it was supposed to be like almost $10 trillion.
What if the theory doesn't work out?
Well, it's finance. It's actually, people study business. It's based on models. They don't just pull this stuff out of the air. It's based on models of how things tend to work, the market, and that's how it tends to work. Just like supply and demand. When you decrease the supply, the demand goes up. It's totally different from what I'm talking about. It's the same thing as a theory, and it's been studied by business models. And
so you trust Congress that they've got this under control?
Oh, Congress, no. And that actually
aren't
brings
they
up,
the ones writing the bill?
I think for they have a bill proposal, and I saw it, and it looks fine. I don't see.
If you don't trust Congress, and there are all these special interests, but this bill's being written by Congress with the input of the special interests, how is the outcome going to be one that's good?
Well, because for the tax plan, there's brackets. It's pretty straightforward. There's, what they're doing is what they're doing. And from what I've seen with the closing of the loopholes, the decreasing of the taxes for small businesses, corporations, and regular people, that's all black and white. So there's nothing really, I don't know what you're asking. Do I think there's something hidden in there?
Well, I'm sure. What I guess I'm interested in is we've established that Congress is not doing the job the way you all would like, and that special interests are still in the mix. So if those two things are still very prevalent in Washington, how there's going to be an outcome that people are going to be satisfied with?
So I think that the special interests would come into play, in my thinking, more for things like healthcare. I understand corporations want the tax cuts, so they're lobbying, but that's just one issue. They're going to get the tax cuts anyway. He's already said they're going to get tax cuts. But one thing I find, my problem with Congress is we did elect a Republican majority. They are supposed to work for their constituents, and then you have people that are holdouts. We almost have this vote, but you have one person who has their beliefs and they're sticking by them, and they're not going to, like Rand Paul, John McCain, they're not going to change, what they think they stand for. Okay, well, that's honorable, but it's about compromise. So if you're standing for what you believe in is going to prevent the party as a whole from accomplishing anything, I don't see how that can be justified. I think they need more bipartisanship in general. We need the Democrats' input. But to do that, nobody's going to get what they want 100%. There has to be some sort of compromise.
One of the things, first of all, taxes, it goes to pay the salaries of all the people that work in government. And we have probably half again as many people as we need working in government. So if everybody would pare down the people that are under them in government, but it's awful hard to get the directors of different parts of government to pare down their people. But it's something that has to be done. And if you do that, then you have more money in taxes to go into other programs that are necessary. But they keep adding program, and each program comes with about 150 people. So it never gets any smaller.
Dennis, what do you want Donald Trump to stop?
Tweeting.
What's wrong with the tweeting?
It seems like he's on it all the time, and the Democrats are having a field day with it. All his opponents are, oh, look what he tweeted, and look what he tweeted. It's like, just stop tweeting.
But I thought that was a part of his telling it like it is.
That's what I like.
Well, it is, but...
Let the Democrats stop picking them apart and be tending to what they should do in Washington.
Right. It's like taking it away from him. I think there's got to be a different way to get across his point without tweeting. Because I'm not on Twitter, so
He
I have
can
no idea what he's
Facebook me
tweeting.
anytime.
Yeah, go on Facebook or something like that. But yeah, it's distracting.
Tom, tell me your thoughts about the debt and whether the president or Republicans in control of Washington are doing enough about that for you.
I haven't heard there any talk on spending lately. It seems to be all about taxes, which is fine. That's half the equation. But the other half of the equation is spending. And for years, and I mean going back 2 administrations at least, we really haven't had a focus on spending and just reassessing. Every good corporation reassesses once in a while. Are we spending our money in the right places? Is it effective? Can we do better? And we never do that. It just grows and grows and grows by leaps and bounds. And it's time to take a little pause, look at different programs, reassess different departments, and find out, can we do it better, and really try and reduce the deficit. Because if we have a historically low period of low interest rates, and if that changes, if we see interest rates start growing and spiking, we're going to have a large portion of our spending go toward interest. And I mean a large portion. The numbers are huge. And that can be a very serious problem going forward, where we're spending too much of our budget on interest, not enough on the essential services of the government.
Peter, what's the most important issue to you?
The social issues are really important because I'm a firm believer that the United States needs to have a strong cultural renewal. It seems like a lot of the division we're having is that people are spending too much time in their own heads. There's not like Facebook and Twitter. A lot of the breakdown in communication in politics is people are wrapped up in their own virtual reality, just looking at text on a screen, where there used to be, well, there's no golden age in politics, but if people were able to speak to each other face to face more often, you realize that they're a human being, right? And that you don't need to threaten to kill them every other day. It happens on Twitter all the time, right? Violence is incited often. So I think that for the most important thing could you repeat your question one more time? Do you mind?
Well, you're doing great. Let me ask it this way. Peter, you said you want a cultural renewal. Who leads that cultural renewal? How does that come about?
Well, thankfully, this is America, and we get to decide that together, right? This shouldn't be a top-down thing. You were talking about special interests in Congress and like trusting as an American, I can't trust the government. I think that the government is something that needs to be limited, needs to be prevented from intruding in people making their own decisions. Now, there are certain things, like obviously, police, roads, things like that. Education, I think, is important for government to be involved in, but there needs to be less emphasis put on the federal government, more emphasis put on your own community. Instead of yelling at your buddy on Facebook, go out into your community, engage, try to build something good out of your life that isn't in here, isn't online, right? If we start doing that, then we'll start talking to each other again, we'll start doing beautiful things again, art will get better maybe, that'd be great.
Yeah. Dina, tell me, who should your kids look up to in our culture?
right now there's really not very many people to look up to. What I was thinking is that Congress, our society, how it is right now, the divisiveness between the Republicans and the Democrats, Trump supporters, non-Trump supporters, all of the hate that we were just talking about, you were talking about, and being sort of flushed into the community. It seems to me like that's a mirror reflection of what's going on in Congress. Nobody wants to listen to the other person's point of view. They don't even want to listen. Nobody wants to talk. Nobody wants to find compromise. And until that happens, nothing is going to benefit everybody if people are so stuck on. I don't even think that it has to do with whether or not someone supports something. It's even if they support it, they're not going to say they do because they can't. That's more important. So with that happening in the government and what we see happening with in Hollywood right now, I don't think there's anybody to look up to.
Dennis, who's the moral leader in America? Does America have a moral leader?
Right now, no. No. When I think back when I was younger, like we look up to Eisenhower. I personally liked Kennedy, and those are people that we looked up to. Wasn't because they're heroes of the war, but as a young kid, those are the people that we looked for leadership. We really don't have that cut and dried person anymore. When Reagan was in office, people looked up to him. We haven't had that.
As a Trump supporter, though, you're not listing the president in that same category when you name moral leaders who've been presidents.
No, because he's not, I wouldn't say lacking morals, but he's not leading like that, like a moral leader. People now, they'll look up to whoever's the Pope or whoever's in charge of their church. That's where people should be learning morals. And when I was in elementary school, before they stopped praying, our teacher every day wrote passages from the Bible to say, this is what happens and this is why you do what you need to do. And we learned from that. That's how we learned our morals. Now there is no teaching of any kind of religion. And I think kids are getting lost.
Should the president be a moral leader? Is that part of the job?
I don't think it's part of the job, no. I think your family, your parents, your friends and community are the real moral leaders, and on occasion maybe a religious leader as well, but no, I don't look to the president as a moral leader, any president.
Terry, tell me about the opioid crisis. Manchester, New Hampshire has been hit by that. How has that affected the community?
I really don't know, but I was thinking on driving on the way here, I've heard that most of the drugs come through Lawrence and Lowell up to New Hampshire, and even like 89 and 93 are drug routes and stuff. Well, where does Lowell and Lawrence get the drugs? Are they coming from Mexico or overseas? That's where we need to focus. I know we need to treat people who are addicts and hurt and stuff, but what's the cause? What's the root of all this? That's what nobody talks about, in my opinion.
What do you think the root of the opioid addiction is? What do you think the cause
The
is?
addiction?
Well, what do you think the root of the...
Drug supplies?
What do you think the root of... So are you talking about the physical drugs themselves or the root of why people get addicted?
Physical drugs.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I don't agree.
Go ahead.
I think that kids are not taught to be independent and make their own decisions. And then when they get into grammar school and high school, they give in to people influencing them, and they're not always good people. And children are always, now you can't hit a child or hit each other. I don't mean you hit a kid. But children can't have a school fight in the playground, pushing and shoving, because that's not good. And I think this whole PC thing has gone way out of hand. And children, they don't stand up for themselves, and they're not self-sufficient.
Do you think President Trump has helped foster a sense of community in America, or?
Oh, he's made it much worse. I think that any kind of cultural renewal that happens will not be done in any reference to him. This is something that has to happen between people.
Why won't the president, in the past, presidents have brought nations together. Why is President Trump, why can't he do that?
Well, he's a funny case, like, because he's a lot. I don't want to bring in like his history, war history, and something like Sun Tzu talked about for a general. You never let anyone know what you're doing. You tell everyone something different so that you can manipulate them to get what you want done. And it seems like that's kind of how he operates. Like, he just will lie or like make things up for the effect it has on other people. That's not a way that a good person will live their life. That's what happens when you're trying to defeat someone else, right? And that's what he's trying to do. That's not a moral leader. Is the president supposed to be a moral leader? If we're looking to the president of the United States for how you want to live your life, you got some other problem going on. Like, you have some problem, like maybe you have daddy issues,
So should we, Terry, start looking at our presidents and just take out the being honest, being truthful, the things that we normally associate with presidents? Should we absent that and say, hey, if they're effective, that's okay?
I'm thinking about this, that the president should be a moral and spiritual and intellectual leader for the nation, not for the religious part of the nation or the educational part of the nation, but he's supposed to protect and preserve the country and its laws and not let other countries override us and take us over. That's what he's for, I think, basically. Moral leadership, I think he should be a moral leader in terms of what the country is about and what we stand for and what our relationship is with other people. But individuals have to look to God or parents or philosophers or whatever else they desire to better themselves.
Tom, does the president tell the truth, and if he doesn't, does that bother you?
It does bother me. I think we're a much better nation when people tell the truth. We're a much better community when they tell the truth, and it is very frustrating. It's one of the big knocks on the president is that he can't seem to keep his ego in check and keep the lies under control. And it's personally one of my biggest frustrations with him. He's in a very serious role. He needs to act presidential and step it up. It's been almost a year, and I'm hoping that he'll turn the corner soon, because he's going to start losing even his supporters at some point.
You voted for him. Is your vote up in the air now?
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. I really thought we'd be further along by now. I thought he would have turned that corner early on, and that hasn't happened. So yes, I am disappointed overall. And it'll be interesting in 3 years or less when we start seeing who's running for office next time.
What would you say to him if you could talk to President Trump and he'd listen?
Well, I would say it's time to step up. You've had your fun, you've taunted a lot of people, you've gotten back a little revenge here and there, but it's time to step up, act presidential, bring people together, and grow the country. Make it a better country when you leave than when you got there.
Dina, do you have any advice for the president?
Sure. So I feel like the president, he's detrimental to what he's trying to do. I don't feel like he's trying to manipulate people, doing it on purpose, or whoever said that. I feel like he is weak. That's a sign of weakness. He knows he shouldn't be tweeting these things. And it worries me because he says he's a smart person, but it's clear to everybody that this is not helping him. And to me, I would think the whole reason why I was okay voting with him is because I believed he was going to surround himself with the right people. And I'm pretty sure the people around him are telling him, that you need to stop doing this. When he has, he does something great, and then he tweets about the NFL, people taking a knee, and all of the attention is focused away from what he's doing, and everybody's hung up on this issue that really, it's important in its own way, but it's not President tweet important.
Do you think he doesn't listen to the people who surround him?
Yes, and that's what worries me. That's how I feel. That's my point. Is very worrisome, because I have to imagine that people are telling him not to do this. And I also would like to think that he must know this isn't helping him. So he's either not as smart as he says he is, or how I want to believe he is, or he's not listening to these people, because I'm sure they're telling him that. And if he's not listening to them on that, it does worry me for what might happen in the future, that he might not listen to them.
Were you going to say?
I think if everybody would read the Constitution, it says that the president is supposed to protect us from enemies from abroad. The federal government was never set up to take care of education. That was a state thing. And everything else, the insurance, the federal government should never be involved. They should not be involved in commerce. And it's all laid out in the Constitution in the beginning. And so the whole of Washington is butting into things that they shouldn't be involved with. And they should be protecting the nation.
Let me ask you this, Diane. The president on health care said he was going to get more people covered, it was going to cost less, and be better health care. Do you think he was serious about that, or was he doing what you're saying, which is expanding the federal government?
He was expanding the government, which I think the insurance should go back to the state. And the insurance companies should be able to go across the state borders and sell to individual people. And I think they could come up with some great plans that people could afford and do it on a graduated basis.
Dennis, are you worried about North Korea?
Yes.
Why?
Their leader is not stable. It's, looking what's come out of North Korea from people that have escaped and other news sources. He's sitting up as like the king, and if he doesn't like somebody, they disappear. I don't think he's stable enough not to push the button.
Do you have trust in President Trump to manage the North Korean question?
With who he has for with Mattis and his other cronies in that, he has people that know what to do. I think the General Mattis will tell him exactly that this is what we need to do. Right now, I see them either try and get China involved and tell them, put the squash on them. Whether China will do that or not, we have to wait and see.
Terry, do you trust President Trump's instincts with North Korea?
Yes. And I don't know why. I feel he's got enough bravado. I know he knows about the Middle East, and he has for decades. He's got a great handle on what's going on there, so I don't understand why he wouldn't have a good handle on what's going on with China, Russia, and North Korea. War's not really my thing, so I don't really.
Peter, President Trump famously said that the support of those who voted for him was so strong he could shoot somebody in the middle of Fifth Avenue and they'd still support him. Does that define your support?
No. I mean, I see what he's saying when he says that. It's funny. Like, if he said that at a cocktail party, I'd laugh my butt off. I get it. But in literal terms, does that describe my support? No. If I was going to put parameters around my support for him, I have to hold him to the standard that he says he holds to everyone else. He hates losers, right? He hates people who fail at what they do. And he said all these things that he's going to do. He's like that really cute boyfriend who's like saying, oh, I'm going to love you, I'm going to be with you forever. And then if he doesn't deliver, he's a jerk. And if Trump fails to deliver on his promises to any acceptable degree, he's a loser. Get him out, right?
What would a failure be? What promise would for you be a failure if he didn't deliver?
A deal breaker would be if the economy reverted, if healthcare stayed the way it was, or like if the creep kept going on, like you were talking about, where things get more and more government control, then that would be a deal breaker. If energy independence, if we're not on track towards that, right? And the private sector doing it. I'm not interested in government attempts to institute solar or things like that. So those are a few examples of things that would really,
Tom, I want to ask you, Dina mentioned the kneeling at the football games. The president has talked about kneeling at football games. He's spent some energy on that topic. Does that matter to you? Is that important to you?
Not at all. It's a distraction. I want the president focused on the core things that affect the most Americans: the economy, jobs, taxes, immigration reform, pushing that through. I don't really care about the football games, to be honest with you.
Dennis, do you think the president could be distracted from staying on what's the core issue of his job?
Yeah, he does. He does get distracted and goes off on tangents off and on. And I think that his cabinet needs to take him by the collar and say, this is what we need to do. Whether they're not brave enough to do it, I'm not sure. But I'm sure that somebody like General Mattis wouldn't stop and tell him that, hey, this is what we're going to do. You don't get to be a four-star general in the Marines if you're just hanging back. He gets distracted way too much, and his cabinet is going to have to steer him in the correct direction, get back on the rails, and.
He doesn't even have the cabinet he wants, and that's shameful. Who is Trump? He doesn't have the cabinet that he wants, so he's not really actualized.
Why doesn't he have the cabinet he wants? He has people in the positions in his cabinet.
Well, he's had people nominated, but the Senate won't act on it.
Right.
Dina, if we're here in a year, what worries you between now and then?
Worries me in which way?
About our country.
Mostly what worries me is the whole free speech issue, the butting heads between liberals and conservatives, to the point where people can't protest peacefully without both sides attacking each other, to the point where, white supremacist groups are running down and killing people in the road, where a conservative speaker can't speak at a college without a riot. I mean, it's just very sad, and it's embarrassing as a country, I think, and I think we're on the wrong road. I have kids, and this isn't the world I want them to grow up in.
Would you say to you that the president is a role model for your kids?
I agree that it would be great if the president were. I also have to say that we elected him. And then I would also point out the Bill Clintons of the world, and there are several things that Barack Obama did that I don't think displayed good morals. So I think that when you ask a question like that, universally it hasn't been so. Unfortunately, these are the people who are supposed to be an example. These are the people who are supposed to do the right thing, and that's why we always get let down by them. Democrat, Republican, it doesn't matter. And I think that speaks a lot for our country as a whole. And you're seeing it spill out into the communities. I mean, it's really sad when somebody can't go speak. If you don't like what I have to say, don't come hear me. Just get over yourself. We have to respect one another more. if you're not listening to people, how is anybody ever going to come together? And I think that's what's important. I really feel like we need to listen to each other, and there has to be more bipartisanship.
Dennis, what's changed here in Manchester since the president won the primary?
That's a good question. Other than the amount of drug overdoses is like totally unacceptable. It's just increased astronomically. Why? You know, it's not really because Trump got elected. It's just that's what's happened since then. Is it illegal alien issue? Is it the trafficking across the border? You know, would that wall help the narcotic trafficking? Probably. You know, it gives it less places to go. I mean, granted, there's digging tunnels under the border as it is, but it's going to help. And stopping that trafficking of cocaine from South America or Mexico, and that's what's got to happen, and that's something that the president has to deal with in a more direct manner.